Hey everybody, my name is Antonio Diaz, and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Life and Thyme, and thank you for joining us. Internet world, this has now become my world for the past couple months, and we've been hosting these webinars every single week for free, really just to kind of make sense of what's happening and to connect with our industry friends and to connect with you. And more than anything is also to provide education and resources to better understand what we're facing today. And today's webinar, there's so much to talk about, and it's focused on the future of restaurants and how they'll look like post-COVID. We're talking about 500,000 independent restaurants, 11 million jobs, so the stakes have never been higher. And the biggest question is that everybody has been asking is, how do restaurants reopen, and what does the future look like for this industry? So today I'm being joined with Timothy Hollingsworth, who is the chef and owner of Otium in Los Angeles, California. We also have Elizabeth Tilton. She's the founder and CEO of the hospitality services firm Oyster Sunday, and she's tuning in from New Orleans. And then we have Alexis Readinger, founder and hospitality design and architecture firm of Preen in Los Angeles. And then we're also joined by Simon Kim, who's a restaurateur and owner of the Michelin-starred Cote in New York City. So thank you everybody for joining us. And I'm just going to dive in because there's just so much to talk about here. And I want to start with you, Tim. So Otium remained closed completely for the past few months, since March, when LA's shelter in place was put in place, was mandated. And there's obviously an emotional cost to that, to not, to stay closed or to reopen. I'm sure there was an immense emotional cost to that, but I want to focus more on like the business cost of staying open versus remaining closed. So what did that look like for Otium specifically?
Antonio, I think he dropped.
Oh, there he is. He's coming back in.
Okay,
good. There he is. He's connecting. Tim.
Hey, sorry, I kicked out.
I thought you got scared of us and got scared of the question. So, Tim, the question I was asking you was, what did remaining closed versus opening or staying open for Otium, what did that look like from a business cost? I know there was like an immense emotional cost to that, but from a business perspective, what was sort of like the difference between remaining open, pivoting to takeout, grocery model, or staying closed, and you decided to keep the restaurant closed? So what was like the thinking and the behind that, and the business costs around that?
One thing to consider is cash flow, right? Through going and exploring the new options available, doing takeout, doing prepared meals like meal kits to go, things like that. Starting that up, we've never done it before at all. So to be able to start that up, pursue it, try to understand what the costs were, and to kind of analyze, is it going to be worth it for us or will it not? And at that point, we don't really know what the government help is going to be, what our partners are going to say, what our landlord's going to say, all of those kind of things. So, we looked at cash flow, we looked at the potential revenue, we looked at the cost based on, employees, and then the benefits, how many employees will we be able to bring back? And then what is the risk of, exposure to them, based on working together, and then exposed to, the different people that they're going to come into contact with. And ultimately, based on our location and based on finances, we decided to furlough all of our employees. So they'll still be able to get their insurance, and they'll be able to collect unemployment. And I think that decision we made, we thought was the best for the employees, the best for the business. In order to be able to spend the money that we had, to reopen and you know, and come back and be able to offer people jobs back.
So, so just real quick to kind of, get people up to speed, and anybody who isn't a restaurant owner, what does it take to reopen a restaurant? So you've been closed for a few months. What does it take to reopen the dining room? And meaning, like, you can't just unlock the doors and say you're now open. There's a significant cost in the restart. Can you? I know there's so many moving parts to that question, but can you just kind of like high level, just briefly explain what that looks like of reopening a restaurant?
Yeah, I mean it's very similar to opening your restaurant in general, right? You have a pre-opening budget, and that pre-opening budget you have to stay within in order to make sure cash flow is going to work. But you know, pre-opening for a restaurant like Otium is going to be $50,000. You know, and what is that going to pay? That's going to pay for labor, building up to it. That's not going to pay for, you know, the rent. You're just talking about like kind of like hard costs in building inventory, and part of it will be more than opening a normal restaurant in the sense that we have to now create a new business model. So based on that new business model, we're going to have to, you know, meet with our to-go container suppliers to figure out what is going to work for meal kits, or to go rewrite our menu because our menu wasn't built for to-go. So we'll rewrite the menu. That will potentially be different than in dining. So we'll have like our sort of in dining Otium plus to-go Otium. So it'll be completely different. We're looking at changing up the model completely to a certain extent, and the cost of doing that is really high. You know, all the food and inventory that you have, literally nothing is good anymore. You know, you might have frozen some stuff, but you know, you're not necessarily thinking of creative ways to use that product.
Right, right. Well, we're gonna get into how your food might be changing and the vision for it in a second, but I'm going to switch it over to Simon. Simon, so for Cote, you remained open throughout this entire time and kept takeout going, and you have introduced a few new business models like a wine shop, a butcher shop. Can you kind of just walk us through what the intention was for these new models and how they've worked so far?
Sure. The intention initially was pretty simple. I didn't have a real long time to go over the P&Ls and really look at the financials as great as I should have, you know. But I think it was more along the lines of there's chaos, and government allowed us to be part of essential business where we could actually operate. So we just dove right in, and the logic behind it was, we have employees, and the unemployment, we weren't exactly sure how that would really impact their lives. So we decided to keep those management team as well as our vendors. So we decided to just kind of open the restaurant and figure it out. And about 2 weeks before we were mandated to close, we were keeping a very close eyes on what was happening in Asia. And in Asia, it really hit much faster. So we actually had prepared for delivery to a certain level. So we had menu set up. We already had allocated what kind of vessels we're going to use. So that made it really easy to kind of transition into delivery. And as we because we were at the restaurant, kind of rolling with the punches, if you will, there were many different opportunities that came. Like, for example, we got to feed the frontline workers. We work with the frontline foods, and that kind of helped provide that. So yeah, that was and provide that, as well as like the state care package, and that's been also going really well. So we're trying to figure this thing out still, 2.5 months in.
Right, absolutely. So would it have been more cost effective to just remain closed?
I think so. If you receive a PPP and just shut everyone and furlough everyone, and with that $600 additional unemployment, I think if you actually shut financially, maybe, I mean, especially if you can negotiate with your landlord and your restaurant is closed, obviously there's no rent coming out. So whereas if you open, it opens can of worm, if you will. So financially, it may actually have been better, at least, for this past almost 3 months. If I remain closed, I would have burned a little less cash for sure. But I feel like there's a tremendous learning opportunity and experiences and things, and also our ability to connect with our customers and community. I feel like there was a great gain that's not necessarily financial, but more of a just call it brand recognition or whatnot.
Definitely. Okay. Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you, through Oyster Sunday, you have provided an incredible amount of free resources on the website and for the industry, from data sets and rent structures to alternative business models. If anybody hasn't checked out Oyster Sunday's website, you should definitely check it out. There's so many incredible things you could look up on there. And now, being a few months under quarantine, what have been some of the biggest takeaways for you in terms of the data and what you've been collecting about the industry now looking back? How can this information and this data kind of inform us to make better decisions as things start to reopen?
Yeah. So we actually I guess it was on March 16th, started putting out those resources and trying to make sense of just, there's so much information going out about who was closing and what delivery was happening, but we felt that it wasn't really giving information for operators to inform them how to move forward or making decisions to the best of the ability. And so we started to aggregate everything from the CDC and all these things that you'll see on our website that kind of all went to a reopening critical path. That is our key document on our website. But we're thinking about all the fundamentals of restaurants. And the reason why we were able to kind of turn our attention to pivoting quickly to a reopening critical path and making that public and open source and free was that we understood that if we could distill down restaurants' decision-making that are based off of finance, accounting, operations, safety, human resources, then we could actually provide operators with a playbook that they could accommodate or could kind of morph into what they needed for their own operations. So we worked on that pretty quickly, but we, starting early March, started offering all free consultations for any operator in the United States. Started with our own networks, and to date, we've talked to about 80 operators around the United States. And what that provided for us was, just an extra, like anything that we had, any question was never too big or too small. We do our best to find the answer. But what it also provided was that we were able to hear on the ground from Phoenix, Detroit, Charlottesville, Virginia, New York, LA, you name it, and we're hearing these common themes. And so as we started hearing these themes, we started to address them through resources, because we, again, since we're trying to look at this 30,000-foot view, we're sitting there saying, what are the commonalities that people are trying to address versus only pinging it as individuals? So we really are hopeful that those resources are helpful. We'll continue to add as we hear comments, questions being asked, but some of those articles were definitely sparked by the conversations we're having. I'm hoping that, I think there's some really great companies that are coming out with some data sets and infographics that are using their data to inform us about decisions, such as Bento Box came out with a couple. There's a website called Our World of Data that did great infographics about decision makings and governance around the world. Kind of going back to Simon's point, we can kind of look back on previous decision making. So I think there's still a lot of unknowns, but I think what we always have to go back to and identify is that restaurants are three components, which are product, operation, and design. And we have to identify within those three kind of circles, like what can we address to then apply what we don't know and to just find stability in this.
One of the things that I noticed on part of these resources is that there's a lot of talk about rent negotiations. And I wanted to just kind of touch on that for a second, and which is, represents a massive expense for restaurants. And are any of your clients having success in negotiating rent right now? Or what should operators be thinking about when it comes to negotiating their rent? I mean, especially given the fact that restaurants need to operate at least like 80% capacity, if that, to start even breaking even. And there's going to be limitations on capacity in the dining room, and every seat is money that costs, especially when it comes to rent. So what have you been telling your clients, or have you had any success in negotiating the rent or lease?
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of inquiries about that. It kind of was like the first wave was how to manage HR. The second wave was PPPL and rent negotiation. We're really lucky to have had two lawyers, Jasmine Moy in New York and Drew Macklin from Klug Farber, who kind of sat there, called us and said, we're willing to offer our services for free to help operators negotiate this to the best of our ability. So we're able to kind of not only have our own opinions of like, here's rent structures that you can see on our website, but also having the voice of legal counsel that can help negotiate that, or at least address questions that may be coming up that we may not be suited to answer. But definitely, I mean, I think, and I know Timothy and Simon probably have plenty to say about this, but the amount, your biggest overhead, right, is rent right now, particularly if you aren't really able to get rent abatement. But the things that we were informing, talking to operators about was like, if you are able to get abatement, how are you documenting that? Are you adding addendums to your contracts? Are you able to negotiate a percentage of revenue, like with a base fee or percentage of revenue or a management fee? Like just trying to think through these options, because right now is the time in which to renegotiate. And some would argue that operators have more leverage than ever before to renegotiate those, because they know landlords don't want to be vacant. And to get a new operator in this climate would be risky. So take that as you will. But I do think that there is a lot more on the table. So just helping operators think through that. And of course, it's city by city, landlord by landlord, realtor by realtor. So there's no secret sauce, but there are things you can ask for and ways to approach it that can set you up for success, in our opinion.
Mm-hmm. Alexis, with Preen, you designed and built some of our favorite restaurants here in Los Angeles. What sort of modifications to existing restaurants are you having to make, or being talked about, or will be made once restaurants start to reopen their dining rooms?
I think one of the very first things that we started doing for some of our clients was just creating new layouts and expanding into outdoor space when they could. I think there's a lot of conversation right now about, I don't know if you guys have seen the images on the internet of like the individual greenhouse restaurant, or I've been thinking about Workshop in Palm Springs being great with their sort of concrete bunker booths. I think there's going to be a wave of sort of artifice that gets applied, whether that's, the bulletproof screen or the sort of umbrella table or whatever it is. And then I think that's actually.
I saw one where there's they're like in bubbles.
Yeah.
You see that one where they're like in bubbles? Like two
Right.
people are having a dinner and they're just like in this, like it's like Bubble Boys.
Right. It could be a lot of fun for a pop-up, for like a temp installation. But I think in the long run, we're going to see some sort of interesting creative solutions, but I don't think that's going to be the long-term impact. I think that the long-term impact is more in shift of typology. And we're already getting more calls for F&B concepts with market attachment. I think that everyone has now finally learned how to do grocery delivery. So big box markets become a lot less important, and specialty curated, chef curated markets become a thing. So, we had already been in a trend to move towards limited service model, fast casual market. I think that you'll see that continue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested also in potential supper club conversation. I'm curious to see what will kind of emerge from there. Mm-hmm. We were already in a heavy trend towards membership, so the Sohoification of the world. Looking to see if anything pops up like that in F&B. And just on a really practical level right now, we had talked briefly earlier, Um, you know, we have one project at Piccalilli in Culver City, and we're in deep conversations with the city about them potentially shutting down Main Street and using that as an urban plaza. So I think there's going to be an impact on cities in general, especially in New York, where you don't have room to spread out, right? There has to be some sort of thing. So it's like replazification of the urban centers, I could foresee.
Yeah, Simon, like from your perspective, as you start to think about what the future of dining might look like for your restaurant in New York, where space is so limited, how do you see that? I mean, in LA, we have a little bit more space, but in New York, you know, there's only so many seats you can fit in already, and now if you're at capacity or limited capacity, social distancing, tight quarters in the kitchen, what has that conversation been like with your restaurant?
So New York City is really well known for that, jam-packed restaurants, right? And that's part of the appeal. And when you see so many people all dining in one small tight room, there's a kind of you don't actually get to see that pretty much anywhere else in America other than like New York and cosmopolitan cities. And there was some alluring and things about those kind of restaurants, but obviously all those restaurants are going to be in a very, very dire trouble. When we think about post-COVID-19 world, we as a Cote Korean steakhouse, we're in a very fortunate position because our tables are very far apart to begin with, because our tables all have a individual grill and a gas system. So we're very fortunate in that sense, along with the ventilation that's installed in every single grill that also creates a negative air pressure, which basically sucks everything out to the exterior. And from what my manufacturer has been saying, it takes about 6 cents. The air circulation in this restaurant is about 6.6 times higher than that of a conventional restaurant. So I feel like on that front, personally, we're in a better place. But that being said, I think it's also important to acknowledge that there is going to be post-COVID-19 world, but at the same token, there's going to be post-COVID-19 world, right? So I think it's very important. I mean, immediately following for about a year, maybe year and a half, even 2 years, I think that's the post-COVID-19 world where, before vaccine, while this is still second, third, fourth wave happens, I think that time is the true post-COVID-19. So what we're doing with our design team is that we're going to go ahead and start reinforcing barriers, like what you're looking at here. We have a little barrier between the customer, the table behind us. So we're going to be creating much sturdier barrier, as well as when you go to our bar, there's a interaction between the customer and the bartender. So we're actually trying to figure out what other materials we can use other than plexiglass, because plexiglasses can be, somewhat not as hospitable, if you will. So we're trying to figure that out, as well as I think PPE is extremely important. So we are actually working with a very high fashion designer to create our custom collaborated branded PPE face mask.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I think also part of the interesting conversation, if I will, Antonio, mm-hmm. is, the last 10 years have been so much about access to the energy of the kitchen, access to food production, and high energy dynamics, loud music, and now, people go out because they want to be with other people. So how do you mitigate that conversation? And my friend and I were talking about it yesterday. We were thinking now it really becomes about intimacy in public space. So it's almost even back at a fine dining model, a tiny bit, mm-hmm. Where you have your special table that is for your close loved ones.
But I think, and also too, to kind of catch on to that is that, even with that kind of intimacy, it's more of, and it's something that, when operators are thinking about how and what their point of view is in food, and like what they're serving, what it is to that restaurant, that brand, and how all of a sudden we have to figure out how to translate that from brick and mortar to delivery, and how that gets translated out. I think that you think about like the design of that and what that experience, if you can't manage the experience in your own brick and mortar, you can figure out a way to translate that to their own dining room table. And I even think that's going down to like how assets are shot. Like if you're doing a box for someone, like how does that people who know how much to interact with that product, we're going to have to figure out how to indicate that to consumer base. And I think that all comes through design and branding in a way in which we're going to have to kind of flip it on its head pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like that's already happened with some of the sushi and bento in the past. Yeah, that's a good point.
Tim, what have you been thinking about as far as like branding the safety and the precautions? Because there's going to be so much anxiety from diners going out to actually eat inside a restaurant. There's so many things you have to be thinking about. You're going to be sitting there and you're asking yourself, like, was this a good idea? You're starting to see everybody. I was already kind of like a germaphobe, and now I'm like hyper conscious of like every single touch point. How do you, in a place like Otium or even Cote, there's this just electric vibe and the design is just right. But in Otium, specifically, and we've Life and Time, we've shot there many times and we've been there many times, and there's every design element has purpose. So I imagine that as you're thinking about reopening your restaurant, how does safety become sexy? How can you make it part of the experience without making it fearful? Because if you see people and servers with masks and gloves, and the som is coming over to present a wine, and they're all bundled up, that creates some anxiety. So what have you been thinking about is like, how do you make that part of the hospitality and the experience?
I think rethinking how people enter the restaurant versus everybody opening the door, walking into the host stand, potentially moving the host stand outside, and having a greeter, the host, be able to check people in and then lead them to their table. We're very fortunate that Otium is such a big restaurant and very sectioned off. It's really open. Obviously, the kitchen is it's basically right in the dining room. That's going to be tough for us. Whereas people want to watch the show and see what's going on before, now with everything, people are going to be hyper aware of what's happening with their food and how it's being prepared, and essentially we're going to be on stage for that. And everybody has an opinion. Some people are going to be extremely opinionated about that. Other people are going to be just happy to go out to restaurants. So we're going to have to balance the two. We have a lot of spacing for spreading out the restaurant. We have in front of the restaurant, we have not only the outdoor dining area, but the outdoor lounge area. I'm sure we'll be getting rid of the lounge area and moving proper tables to that area, based on dispersing the tables from the 6 feet away from the guests eating from each other. We also have our mezzanine upstairs, which was traditionally our private dining area. That will probably be turned into smaller tables up there. So I think we're very fortunate in the sense that we'll be able to spread out enough and still keep a lot of our tables that we had. We didn't really serve food in the lounge. It's more of a place for people to kind of hang out and grab a drink. So now people will be eating in that designated area. We didn't book the PDR every single night. So now that will be, normal dining upstairs, where traditionally we've never done that. So we'll definitely be rethinking all of those things. In front of the kitchen, we have booths, and those booths are going to be difficult to, maybe there's plexiglass, maybe we're just seating every other one. So we have to be thoughtful about that. We're working with Studio Unlimited. They're helping us, they graciously offered to help us redesign our floor plan They worked on it at the beginning, and now they're going to help us redesign it, in order to be able to operate, which is extremely helpful. And I think that that's something that we've been able to see out of this is how much people want to stick together and support each other, and that's a really special thing, and something not to take too lightly. As we've been in this call, I don't know if anybody is aware, but now we just got an announcement that we can open up restaurants.
Yeah,
this weekend.
You can open up what?
We can open up for people inside dining this weekend.
Oh my goodness! Congratulations!
Yeah.
I hear you with no prep or planning. You can open up tomorrow.
It's happening live right now. Baby.
Yeah. Good luck, guys.
Yeah.
Good luck. Mazel tov. God bless and Godspeed. So Tim, are you opening up this weekend?
No, there's no way. I mean, and that's something we talked about as we were kind of convening before this took place is the idea of the amount of pre-opening costs it's going to go into to opening a restaurant that has been shut down, or even one that has been doing to go. I think that it's something to not take too lightly, and we're a cash flow business. We don't have a ton of cash, most restaurants don't. And I think that, the scary thing is if we reopen and then all of a sudden, the cases start coming out from Memorial Day weekend and all these things, and somebody pulls the plug, government pulls the plug and says, okay, now you can't, if they even knock it down to 25%, now that's you have to completely adjust your business model again. And, you're trying to do it in a way that you're going to be able to sustain and stay open. And, this stop, like you're going to be open, you can open up in July, and now you can open up tomorrow. It's like, that's a little ridiculous. And, we're going to still be very cautious in the way that we open in order to, be able to sustain the business.
How do you think the actual food in the menu might change? I mean, eating at Otium was very like a communal experience, and you're sharing plates. Is that the way you're thinking about how your food is gonna evolve throughout this time? What have you been like kind of thinking about as far as the menu itself?
I mean, certainly in LA, and I think across the country, family style has been a huge thing lately. And it's honestly the way the majority of cultures eat, and it's the way I prefer to eat. But now, if somebody comes in and they say they want their own plate of food, you're gonna have to be pretty understanding about that, obviously, considering all the facts. So, we've already thought about, what we're going to have to be doing in order to change the menu to individualized portions. And, do you kind of downgrade what you do to a certain extent to lower the price point and to be able to attract more people at this time, or do you make it a little bit more special and maybe it's at a little bit higher price point? I don't know the right answer. We don't know what the market is going to say and what the market's going to demand, and who the clientele is going to be. I'm sure there's a lot of people that aren't going to feel safe and that are going to stay at home. On the other hand, there's going to be people that are going to be dying to go out to restaurants and don't really care and don't really want to wear a mask.
Yeah. Can we talk about bathrooms for a second? And this is open for anybody, because honestly, that's like one of the biggest worries that I have. And there was even a Washington Post article about it titled "The Need to Go is a Big Barrier to Going Out: Why Public Bathrooms Are a Stumbling Block for Reopening." McDonald's is cleaning the bathrooms every 30 minutes. There's been establishments hiring like full-time attendants, always there cleaning the bathrooms. So diners could be seeing the actual act of cleaning, which makes them feel more comfortable. How is the group here feeling about how bathrooms are going to be evolving, and how do we limit sort of the fears and be more cautious and have more safety protocols in restrooms?
To jump in here real quick, I mean, I think one of the most important parts, and I think I think the one thing when you're coming from the consumer's perspective is that they're looking for, they're they want it to be very transparent about what's happening. And the more information that you can arm them with in advance of what decision making you're having on for their safety, your team safety, and your vendor's safety, I think from the get-go, and that can be coming through when you're making a reservation, they can book their table, they can prepay, you give them a time limit, like all these things. But in that, I think how you're taking care of them on a safety precaution should be included in that. And maybe it's even sending your standard operating procedures to letting them know. And a bathroom can be a very key part of that. And there can be barriers that you can create and only not sitting tables near there, just letting them know. But I think, I think Alexis probably can speak more to like the actual physical space of it, but I think it's really important the way in which, even if we turn to things like SoulCycle and other companies and how they're, because in the same way in which you're treating your physical space to save, like make sure there's safety, I think there's a lot to glean from those decision makings.
And picking back on what Elizabeth just said, so what we are doing is, as soon as we open, we're not going to be accepting any walk-ins for time being. The reason being is that we're going to send out a confirmation email that they need to send back in order to confirm their reservation. And there we'll have all the points that we're taking, how we're sanitizing, what we're doing, X, Y, Z. And then the bottom of it, where guest actually has to physically check it, digitally check it, if you will, that says the entire party has not shown any symptoms of following, and then they're giving our permission to take temperature at the door, and also encourage and making them understand that any public area, including when you walk in and in the bathroom and hallways, that we encourage our guests need to wear facial mask to avoid any kind of contamination, if you will. So I think that's kind of an important aspect.
Oh, so you guys are actually going to be checking people's temperatures as they walk in?
We have not finalized, because the optics of holding something that looks like a gun to somebody's forehead is not a very pleasing and hospitable gesture, if you will. But I think it does I think everything changed day by day. So we actually found this technology where it actually lives on the wall. So guests can actually stand in front of it, press it, and it basically prompts the temperature to the guest. So it's not, us checking their temperature, which can be not, somewhat definitely not hospitable, but it can even seem like as a hostile act. Whereas if the guest is checking themselves and and that technology, so we're exploring ways of perhaps purchasing that device.
Alexis, do you want to chime in real quick about just the sort of what the design of restrooms might look like? Are there specific materials that could be used, or the air dryers that like just spray all this water everywhere? Like, what have you been thinking about as far as like how restrooms can be designed differently?
Like we need Simon's downdrafts in the toilets. I think it's an opportunity for Dyson to come out with some great technology and marketing. But a bathroom is a bathroom. There's always Tim, is that your dog's leg?
Yes. He sleeps with his legs and feet in the air. It's what the health department's wet dream: smooth, washable, cleanable surfaces, and perception of sanitation. Bathroom is a bathroom. I think the real issue is when we go through. It's always a conversation if we're approaching surfaces needing to occur as more sanitary, because for some concepts that's important. How do you then offset that so there's also a certain warmth and intimacy? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we did at Helen Ray's, that little peanut, is we wanted there to be a certain feeling of cleanliness to the actual brand, and for budgetary reasons we had white Formica counters, and in order to offset that and to create that sort of fried chicken, we used 2200 Kelvin lighting, which is much warmer than incandescent.
So all over that counter, there's really warm lighting. And then the lights above have dichroic lenses, which cast a really, really, really faint pink glow. So if you look at it from the outside next to Bauhaus, which has got traditional fluorescent lighting, Bauhaus looks blue, and Howland is just red, and it's effusive, and it's warm, and it's intimate. Mm-hmm. And so I think with the social distancing, just actually spacing out the tables, and with the kind of like sanitation conversation, it's the art of the design is in the offset of the distancing of those things.
Right. Alexis, yeah.
Choices about filtration systems, and there's choices about, I know there's like a UV GI light it's very expensive, but it's able to like overnight, it's able to kill bacteria, like it's seen as being able to be airborne viruses are able to be killed by it. And so I think there's other alternatives that are coming out that you're able to kind of complement that, and I always joke about, I don't know if any of y'all remember like the old McDonald's where it was like concrete and then like tiles that went up this, and it just looked like you could pressure wash the whole thing down. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to find somewhere in between the two, and like seeing something very warm and something that's like utilitarian. I'm optimistic to figure out where we do go with it.
It's funny. A few years ago, Jeremy Fox and I were working on a portable temporary kitchen that you could, just sort of drop in front of a museum or whatever, but it was sort of a container thing. But part of that was the completely washable kitchen, where you just have these hoses that come down and do it all.
Yeah.
We could have that for the whole restaurant.
Yeah, for cars, we could do it for work. Yeah.
Right.
Why stop there? Let's do it for people too.
Yeah.
You get hosed down when you enter the restaurant.
Yeah, bathhouse model.
Alexis, so throughout history, every catastrophe kind of changes the aesthetic of design. How do you see the style and aesthetic changing and evolving as far as like colors and materials, or just even the style guide of restaurants changing after post-COVID? Like, what do you think is gonna be the new style guide?
I think it's such an interesting question because I think in some ways the trend in restaurant design, at least as I've mapped it in LA over the last 20 years, usually has an economic and zeitgeist driver. And the period that we're coming out of right now is one of, radical expression, like a lot of design, patterning, colors, 80s, this sort of radical optimism that's been there. And I've been watching the design guides just to see like, what is everyone doing all of a sudden? Because now there's like a wrench in the plan. And so this sort of weird artifice of mimicry and aesthetic that gets picked up with Pinterest and pushed along or Instagram, now everyone's confused. It's just a funny little moment. And so there's a lot of what I'm seeing mediated, and which we were already sort of on a trend to, would be sort of warm, minimal, modern, organic. Surprisingly, like I'd say like tailored earthyism was already happening, and I still see that. I think if you're in a model where you're in a big sanitation conversation, that switches out. But we were already in a heavy trend towards nature in design. I mean, how many hanging plants are dying in restaurants as we speak? And I think that will continue. It's a good question. I think all the exuberance that happened when the economy was revving in the 80s and how that translated into aesthetic, we just went through a mirroring to that. And I'm not sure. But I think we will start to see typology shifts too. And like, it's my personal hope. One of the things I've always liked about other countries is you can go in the Tuileries and like get a bottle of wine and sit in the park. And we're such strange Puritans here. We don't allow this kind of behavior. So I'd like to see that open up. I'd like to see the health department relax with open windows, you know, things like this where we can just sort of ease into an easier lifestyle.
Absolutely. So there's still so much to talk about here, but I wanted just to kind of jump into some audience Q&A, and these are some questions that were submitted beforehand when people were RSVPing here, and I just want to go through as many as we can, and this is kind of open to anybody here. So we have a question here from Jennifer. Would you feel confident investing in a new traditional service style restaurant now whose doors are expected to open in summer of 2021?
If I may, so the question is, would it be, is it a good investment to invest in a restaurant that's due to open summer 2021?
Yeah, I think that's the question.
Yeah. So Cote, we're actually building a restaurant in Miami as we speak. So we're actually due to open December. And through COVID, we were seriously exploring whether we should pull out or not. And we were able to basically speak to the landlord. And if things were to get worse, then we can actually have a leeway to postpone the opening. So I feel like these kind of safety measures that operators doing with the landlord and other if it's not open yet, you should kind of renegotiate and make sure that you have this safe, when another pandemic were to happen, or COVID-19 was to kind of have a real third, fourth, fifth wave, then you're prepared for that legally. But that being said, I'm such a big optimist. As I mentioned, there's going to be a post-COVID world, but there's going to be post-COVID world. In my humble opinion, we can really, really thrive once again. Fine dining is going to be back. The culture, concert, all those things can be back. And as long as the operator is prepared through this experience, like for example, if I were to open another concept, it's going to be a hybrid, right? Because you can't put all the eggs in one basket. By having, almost like basically you should be your concept should be able to do delivery very, very efficiently, as well as your core of sit down restaurant. If I were to create that concept, I feel like it might be a great investment.
Yeah. And to kind of jump in here too, I mean, I think the key word on this is diversification. If we've learned anything, and I think that affects restaurants and revenue streams, and identifying alternative revenue streams to allow restaurants to have a footprint when potential in-house dining is not longer an option. But I also think that affects supply chain. It affects any B2B or any sort of one who's doing only wholesale, or now looking at direct to consumer, or looking at more direct to customer choices. And I think that's what we're going to be learning, is that we can't be single toned. We're going to have to figure out how to sing in multiple different tones and make it sound it's all in pitch for time going forward.
Well,
you have to be able to go both ways.
Definitely.
Retail had been reducing so much, so then you start to get a model like Maketo and DC, which is sort of retail and F&B. I think those kinds of hybrid models are interesting.
Yeah.
So we have another question here from Julianne in England. What role do you see sustainability playing in the opening of the restaurant sector? I think a good point to kind of highlight is sustainability within the producer's end. I think is going to be really important as we start to rethink how our foodways kind of function now more than ever. Restaurants are getting kneecapped, but the producers and the sustainability of how our food supply works is also really critical. I mean, Tim, from your perspective, like, how are you thinking as far as your supply chain and conversations you've had with producers? How can we become a little bit more sustainable when it comes to where our food is coming from and how it's getting to people?
I think just as in a restaurant, we have to think about, like, okay, we we were a place that, sat 100 people in the restaurant. Now we have to do 100 people plus we have to do another 100 in to go, and rework your sort of model. I think a lot of the producers are thinking the same thing. But I think the fear and the awareness that needs to be raised is that, if Otium closes down, it's a restaurant. I'll figure out how to open another restaurant with new investors, with another location, with a different business model. I'll be fine. I'll employ different, I'll employ potentially some of the same people or different people, and the cycle kind of happens. But from a purveyor point of view, these guys are, if we lose some of the artisans that we have, that's going to be a detriment to dining as a whole. You think about, fine dining, or, the dining specifically in Los Angeles, where we're literally seeing our farmers bring the produce, to the markets where we can go and pick it out. That's amazing that we have that capability right now. But if we start to lose these farmers and these specialty farms go out of business, then what does that mean? That means that the product that we're going to be able to get is going to be all kind of mass market, and no one's going to be focusing on the true artisan things, which the world has been kind of going in that direction for a while now. So I think it's very important to raise the awareness that whatever you can do to support these small farms, whether it be ordering online right now, supporting your local restaurants that are using these farmers, I think it's imperative that we all support each other, because if not, we're gonna lose years of hard work.
And Simon, that's kind of like the beauty of what you guys have also been doing with your marketplace, or at least the butcher shop and the wine shop, is opening up your own supply chain to home cooks. And I think that's one of the things that the silver lining throughout this whole experience has been that now a lot of these local producers that were rock stars with chefs and restaurants, they're now becoming like household names within people that are living at home, because they're now buying and knowing the producer, knowing the product that's coming from, that would normally just go to restaurants, and now it's being brought at home. What has that experience been like with you, Simon, as far as opening up that supply chain to home cooks?
So it's been really, really positive, because I think oftentimes as a hospitality professionals, we kind of don't really fully acknowledge just how much impact and how much face time we have with our customers. Like, for example, there's really, let's say, call it, a Samsung, or, Apple is the different, like lots of these IBM, call it, like these larger corporations all have a very limited amount of direct interaction directly with the consumer, right? Whereas us as a hospitality individuals, when they come to our restaurant, or make reservations and dine with us, and then there's that 2.5 hours of very intimate relationship that we create, so that now they're stuck at home. When they think of our restaurant that they are loyal to and they're regular to, I feel like they feel a lot of security. So we're a high-end steakhouse. So buying meat from us, it becomes just a little more elevated experience and familiar experience. And the fact that we actually work with 4 different major beef purveyors in New York City. So, and then we do our own quality check. So it actually has a layer of the sorting out, if you will. And I think that has been a very appealing thing to our customers. So that butcher shop has been going really well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Here's a question from Lorenzo. How is the new age of the industry going to act upon the plastic pollution, since most restaurants are using delivery or to go? What do you think, Simon, since you've been actively doing takeout?
Sure. Yes. So what's shockingly positive is that say 5 to 10 years ago, as an operator, we need stuff readily available fast, right? As much as I really want to be as sustainable as or even regenerative as possible, but if it's not readily available, it's something that we can't do, right? Because at the end of the day, we need to survive, we need to move on. But that being said, the pamphlets and access that we're seeing, and just amount of sheer sustainable, the compostable plastic that's being available right now, it's truly encouraging. I mean, I'm definitely not going to say that all of the stuff that we use as packaging is compostable, because some of them are available, some of them are not. But that being said, I think we are in a such better place than a few years ago.
So we got time for maybe just one or two more questions here. There was a lot of questions that were submitted about the cost of food at restaurants, and this one in particular from Andrew said, COVID has finally shown the general public how difficult it is to run a sustainable restaurant, but do you think diners will ever become more comfortable paying what restaurants should actually be charging for food? There was a lot of questions related to cost of labor, increasing prices around food, and even tips for workers if there's a limit on capacity. Obviously, that's going to trickle down to the actual tips that workers make. What do you guys think?
I think it's scary to think about, but I think that we're in a system that's already broken. The margins on restaurants are so low, and you're fighting for those margins, but you're also fighting to provide a great product for people, to prepare it as well as you can, and to offer great service. And so you're constantly making these decisions that are hopefully okay to kind of downgrade to meet people where your costs really need to be in order to be able to survive. But I think it's an incredible opportunity right now to take a look at the tips and how that's a broken system. And when we raise minimum wage, who that money's really going to? Is it going for the people that really need the help, or is it not? And I think we've been looking at that a lot, trying to figure out a scenario that works. But if you're the first one on the gate and you get backlash, that could shut down your business. So you obviously want to make decisions that are, even like from a service charge perspective, we thought about doing a complete service charge during this time and paying dining room hourly, kind of like Danny Meyer's done in the past. And you think about that. Well, we don't know the revenue that we're going to be, that we're going to have. So it's hard to offer somebody an hourly wage based on a predicted revenue, because if you make a few wrong choices, then you're going to have to pivot extremely fast, or you're going to go out of business. So I think that from a diner perspective, people should be prepared and open to the ideas that restaurants and operators are going to explore different ways in order to make these margins work for us, and hopefully support us and be more positive in the reviews and understanding the things that they're writing, and understand the type of places that they're going to. But things, I do think things will change.
And I think that additionally, I think right now I'll say maybe the right choice of the words is not lucky, but a fortunate time where customers are seeing under the hood more than ever, and understanding the real delicate balance of how these operations are, the cash flow and the constrictions on commissions on delivery, and really having real exposure to this. That I think with that exposure and with that understanding, is we are at a time where we can talk to our customers in a way in which thinking about safety, and everyone's trying to talk to each other and communicate clearly. And I think that if we were to think about not trying to drive food to the bottom, the lowest common denominator, but trying to figure out to actually sell it to the way in which makes restaurants viable. And maybe that's a way of restructuring labor and restructuring commission and compensation from the get-go, and then thinking about COGS and thinking about menu mix. And I think that we're at a time right now where we shake it up and try to figure it out as best we can and run a couple scenarios, because I think the consumer is, again, more educated and always educated, but more educated about stuff they never seen underneath the hood the way they are right now.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up here, the last question I want to ask to each of you, through times of crisis and catastrophes like this pandemic, oftentimes we get the most creative solutions and fast. Things happen very quickly. I mean, who would have thought we would have cocktails to go? Like, all of a sudden, ABC is able to mobilize very quickly and make come up with a solution the next day. So, and ultimately, I think change and solutions come from the people. And what we've noticed through this whole crisis with the restaurant industry is that so many people at the top in their government don't fully have a complete grasp of how the industry works. And we're seeing now more than ever all the gaps within the restaurant community or the restaurant industry, how it works, the structure that is so flawed, specifically in the cost of food and labor, as Tim was even mentioning. So that being said, now that we're more together more than ever, and we're having conversations like this, and there's all sorts of different coalitions happening around the country with restaurants, people are listening, and it's up to the people to really drive change and hopefully come out of this with a stronger food system that is more empathetic and more sustainable. So my question to each of you is, what's your hope for the future when it comes to redefining or changing a certain aspect of the industry, and to hopefully have that silver lining? What is that thing that you hope will be different once we come out of this? Maybe we could start with you, Alexis.
Oh, on the spot. I was sort of laughing internally because I have a lovely colleague who has designed a proprietary robotic vegan restaurant pod, and is funding for that right now. And I think it's very cool. It's also totally the opposite of our traditional restaurant landscape. Just in a really, this is just my personal interest in a simple way. I've been so interested in nature space and outlier areas to urban centers for a long time. I love to just see the sort of the F&B culture begin to migrate out into these spaces as people, I think people will be drawn to them, and to see the nature of the food conversation for the entire nation continue to evolve. Because getting great food in some of these outlier regions is not exactly something that's there. So that's just a personal desire of mine. But then it continues the conversation of well-being of animal, compassion in farming, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Elizabeth, what about you? What's your hope for the future as far as driving change?
I mean, I think the one thing that's been very clear from this whole time is the amount of amazing people we've been interacting with that maybe we'd never met, or things we're hearing about we've never even known about. And I think the more we know, the better off we are of trying to find, and I kind of go back to the Venn diagram, but where it all overlaps, and trying to figure out some solutions that we're not doing it in echo chambers, that we're doing it with a lot of voice at the table. So I am really optimistic that even if you're looking at just restaurant operations and reconfiguring what that could look like. I mean, at Oyster Sunday, we're a corporate office for independent restaurants, because we think that if we can pool resources, we can help a lot of operators have a more viable and sustainable business, sustainable in the greatest use of the word. But I do think in the immediate, I mean, I think we're going to learn how to really feed our neighbors and really feed our hyper-local community. And maybe that's people with food insecurity, or that is on a more, like, just in a very localized way, as much as ambition is to be national. And I think that we're going to learn a lot more about our neighborhoods than we ever had in a long time. So I think that will be a positive when we learn how to feed locally.
Absolutely. Tim, what do you think, man? What's your hope for the future as far as driving change?
I hope that, and this is a little contradictory to the business that we're in, but the idea that people are eating at home and in cooking and breaking bread around a dining table as a family again, more so than ever, I think is pretty special. And, I hope people are excited about that and continue to do that, and in the way that hopefully people are doing now. And when you don't have a restaurant to go out to and you're missing, all of these great things, you tend to try meals that are a little bit more adventurous at home and more celebratory. And I really hope we see more of that, and people, we see families doing that. And I hope that restaurants more and more restaurants play a role in the community and the people that need food around them. I think we've seen a lot of people step up and do some really courageous things about, serving and helping people that are in need. And we're certainly built for it in a restaurant. We have the capabilities to be able to do that. We know how to do it. We do family meal for people every single day, twice a day at Otium. And I think that if we're able to offer that up and run our business simultaneously, I think, the world will be a better place for those things happening.
Absolutely. Simon, what do you think from your perspective? What do you hope will be driving change, maybe even from the perspective of New York City, which is just being obviously one of the capital of cases at this point, but things are starting to hopefully mellow out a little bit better.
Yeah, so I think this is our opportunity, right? Because we as a restaurant industry has been, we're here every day, rain or shine, holiday, weekend, whatnot. We're here to serve our customers and our community. And I feel like because the competition has been so big, and we create millions and millions of jobs, and we bring like billions and billions of dollars to our GDP. And I feel like but our voice and our vulnerability and how we function, what are our struggles, those kind of things have never been really part of the conversation when policymakers were, increasing the minimum wages, all these kind of policy changes that directly impact us, So I feel like this opportunity, when we all kind of banded together, we should really kind of push this along and be able to really communicate with the policymakers and whatnot, just to make sure that our industry is, our voices are heard and our hardship is heard. And also, if there are opportunity for policymakers to actually make positive changes, we should be one that actually, are communicating so that this policy makes positive changes for us. So I think, it would be pretty amazing if we can take this time of extreme struggle into basically having our voices heard.
Very well said. My hope is there will be a tip line just for the dishwasher, because I'm so sick of washing dishes at home now. I miss going to a restaurant and like not having to think about like all these things that we have to do at home now. It's just you cook for 2 hours, you eat for 8 minutes, and there's all this cleaning afterwards, and it's just like rinse and repeat. So I really miss restaurants. So hopefully
that's
you guys
genius. I think we should actually do that. There should be just another line, and we can actually make that happen.
Let's do it. Done.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a crazy time, and I want to thank our panelists again, Simon, Tim, Alexis, and Elizabeth. Thank you so much for taking the time, especially during this time that's just so hectic. So we're very, very grateful for you, for dedicating your resources, your insight, and your knowledge and wisdom for everybody else out in the world to hear. So thank you again. There's going to be many more webinars coming up. I'm trying to keep up with at least one every week, but if you have any ideas for specific topics, feel free to send them in. These are completely free, but if you do enjoy what we're up to and these webinars and want to support us, take a look at our membership program at lifeandtime.com. We heavily rely on our members to help us continue doing these webinars and our editorial. But that being said, thank you so much, and stay safe out there.